let's start going through things a bit at a time. Words of the blessing with which Enoch blessed the righteous chosen, who will be present on the day of tribulation to remove all enemies, and the righteous will be saved. There's a thesis statement for you, a summation of what he's going to be talking about.
Okay, I have a question up front.
Yes.
Righteous chosen, is this talking about, is this supposedly talking to the Old Testament saints, or is this supposed to be his version of Revelation?
That last bit you hit on is very good. First Enoch belongs to the same genre of literature that the Book of Revelation does. They are both apocalyptic prophecy. And so a lot of the same rules of interpretation that you would use to try to figure out what in the world is Revelation saying, you're going to use a lot of those very same rules trying to figure out what in the world is Enoch saying. And that's why maybe the two of them have a similar flavor, a similar kind of feel to them, is because they belong to the same genre of literature. That's a good point to notice. And with regard to the righteous chosen, it's not necessarily an Old Testament versus New Testament thing. It's just generally those who are loyal to Yahweh. They're not making a distinction between when Jesus comes versus when he hasn't yet. Now, Jesus does show up a lot in this book. He's called the Son of Man. They're borrowing from Daniel chapter 7. But he doesn't show up until a little bit later in the book.
So this is not about election per se, this is just a general.
Well, the author of Enoch is assuming that salvation is a gift that is given to us. That's why he uses the language of chosen. We do not save ourselves. It is God who does the saving. All right. So, the reason that the book is called First Enoch is for much the same reason that the book of Ruth is called what it is, or the book of Esther is called what it is. Not because that person is the author of the book, but because Enoch is the main character in it. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are all called what they are because that's who the authors were. Matthew wrote Matthew, Mark wrote Mark, etc., etc. But Ruth was not written by Ruth. Esther was not written by Esther. Same way with the Book of Enoch. It's named after him because he's the main human character. Verse 2, he took up his discourse and said, Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by God, who had the vision of the Holy One and of heaven which he showed me. Question for you. Enoch is called a righteous man. I thought no one was righteous, not even one. What do we do with that? Alethea is scared of the question, so she ran away. Yes, Sophie.
Maybe he means a man who is more loyal to God than pagans who worship idols.
Can you read my mind?
We can try.
Very good. So the word righteous, as with many words, it can have different meanings depending on the context that you use it in. So when we talk about righteousness in church, most of the time we're talking about it in the context of Paul and of the letters to the Romans and the Galatians. And there, Paul is talking about righteousness in the sense of our judicial standing before God. When on the final day, when we stand before the throne of God, and the question is asked, on what basis do we claim to be right with God? The only correct answer is the blood of Jesus Christ. We are wicked to the core, to the degree that we cannot save ourselves. No one is righteous in a vertical sense of, I can stand before the throne of God and I can claim that I have kept all of God's commandments perfectly. Nobody's righteous in that sense. But